My name is Marjaneh Rouhani, and I'm here in your presence, and it's a great honor to be here at the international television Iran Aryaee that is supported by each and every one of the freedom fighters whose heart beats for Iran and freedom fighting all across the world, inside Iran, outside Iran. And this program is designed in English. This is for our the constitutional movement program that we usually do twice a week with Dr. Saeed Hamzavi in Farsi, and we get really nice feedback from each and every one of you. And of course there are some issues. Last time I apologize about some technical difficulties that we had, but Dr. Saeed Hamzavi, with the great talent he has, he was able to cover the technical difficulties I was experiencing on my end. Well, today is Thursday, August 19, and in our calendar year in Iran is 28th of Amordad, and it's the reminder of what took place since 1953 when the Iranians rose up and took their system back, brought their own Shah home, and supported him, and that resulted in many years of peace, prosperity, and amazing growth for the community all across the region, and not just across the region, for all the companies, all the corporations that were going bankrupt across the world. And Shah of Iran had amazing ability to negotiate, and he's famous for that. This is not just what I'm saying. Well, for many years, BBC and I want to say a lot of people who want to get credit for what they don't deserve, and they want to falsify history and create false propaganda. They talked about a coup d'etat, and which many scholars now refer to it as actually the renaissance of Iran, because Iranians were aware of what they have, which is the Constitution of 1906 that resulted in the referendum where Iranian women got the right to vote 10 years before the Swiss women did. And I'm going to repeat saying that because when you speak in the United Nations or any other facility or any other international community, a lot of them, despite the fact that they know about Iranian history quite in detail, they ignore and they want to brush it off. And it's our responsibility as Iranians to be able to harbor the truth and give the truth and tell the truth to our offsprings, and so on and so forth. And during the catastrophe of 1979, of course, everybody knows this day was also an anniversary of when Cinema Rex in Abadan was burnt by the Islamic Republic and its cronies, who are in power now, as a matter of fact. And not just Cinema Rex, where 600 people were burnt alive. There were 37 other cinemas across Iran where people were killed and the cinemas were burnt. And places of happiness, places of where people gather, places where people assemble, have been a place where has been a target traditionally by the Islamic Republic. Now, on July 2nd, we all know, after 20 some years, after maybe 21 years of being in Afghanistan, the United States evacuated the military in the middle of the night, and left behind billions and billions and billions of dollars of artillery, state-of-art artillery. And at that point, many scholars were saying, well, what are you just thinking? Why are you doing this? And how do you leave so much behind? And the following day, well, Taliban were taking selfies and pictures. And the following day, where they were just crossing borders and heading to Iran, to the Islamic Republic, where they negotiate closely with them and taking pictures. And there are pictures with Zarif, who is famous in being a liar. As a matter of fact, there are many statements that he has literally lied in the eye of the camera in front of millions of people. Well, I'm a psychiatrist, and to me nothing is an accident. Well, 6 weeks passed, and then all of a sudden we have all this media, from mainstream to alternative media, that is overblown by the tragedy and catastrophic events that are transpiring in Afghanistan. Well, Afghanistan had its government, and they had their own parliament, and every time they were able, they were set to go, and they were gonna make their own laws to kind of move on, basically, and leave whatever had happened between Afghanistan and Taliban behind. Then the United States Embassy would intervene and say that, and the EU would intervene and say, well, no, democracy requires that Taliban be part of the parliament. So they would be getting invitation to get election, for the election, to send a representative to the parliament. And they would say, oh, okay, let us think about it. And they would go, and after a week or so, or like a few days, there would be a school bus full of children getting blown up, especially kids, or some other catastrophic event happening. So this is what's happening now, where BBC again and other mainstream media, and CNN lady who was saying very strange statements in the middle of the chaos, which you have all seen the clip. It just kind of giving legitimacy to a bunch of people who have been known terrorists. Now, there are documents that this whole political Islam was created by the Democratic Party, by Mr. Obama, by Hillary Clinton, who actually testified in Congress. And so to kind of think this is a simple situation, and now all these mainstream media rushing to really create a legitimacy for a very violent, anti-humanitarian, anti-human cult, where they have even stated that women are free within the Sharia of Islam, where in Sharia women are half a man, or women cannot even be a witness because they're half a man. I mean, if they witness a crime, you have to have 2 witnesses, so that means you have to have 4 women to testify. And it goes on and on. You need permission to leave the house. There are, I mean, literally, a woman is a slave. And this goes on with that culture. And I think the same mirror is existing in other countries, where in Australia, for example, under name of a virus, where we know there are treatments for it, from monoclonal antibodies, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine with zinc, improving immune system. and all of it that has been suppressed by the mainstream media. And where is Dr. Fauci, who's responsible for all this, who's saying either no treatment, stay home, and keep measuring your pulse ox until it's below 92%, and then go to the hospital where you get to the CCU and you're blue to die. We've never had this incident in medicine before, and I have talked about this before, as a matter of fact. So things are not making sense, and I think, whoever said live is the opposite of evil, EVIL and LIVE. We have to trust in humanity and how we have survived all kinds of ups and downs throughout centuries, throughout millennia, and even when Galileo was in front of the Church Inquisition, even though he said the earth is flat, he was making a shape of the round, a circle for the earth being round. So truth doesn't change, and it's human nature to follow the truth. And there are many people, many doctors who are coming out, the nurses who have left the system. And I think this has been something that has been very well thought of by a bunch of people who are extremely wealthy, and they want everything. And I want to kind of speak even from the corner in medicine, as a matter of fact, because the cost for medicine for physicians is about 1%, and the rest of it, the 99%, is hospitals, medical equipment, and medications, pharmaceuticals, and all of the other lists that you can look them up. But the focus is always the physician being at fault, or it's the physician problem, or the physician didn't pay attention. And during Mr. Obama, as a matter of fact, there was a push for and a lot of incentive given to the hospitals to employ physicians. And when practices were moved to be owned by the hospital, the first thing the hospitals did, they fired the physician, and they occupied it with nurse practitioners, and not normal nurse practitioners, nurses maybe who were called by their first name, and they had 2 years of experience, because they didn't want to they wanted to pay as less as possible. And that's what the administration of the hospital does. The bottom line is money. And that is an example of what is going on right now. And the bottom line of what the end goal of connecting the dots for all of this that's happening is the money. Now, we know there were some psychological signals right before the Taliban situation happened, where Islamic Republic was meeting with the Taliban, and we know that, as a matter of fact, that they were negotiating to transfer money between Taliban to the Islamic Republic, because they were going absolutely bankrupt and upside down. And the Iranian uprising that we're quite proud of, and what we resent is the mainstream media trying to call Iranians the Islamic Republic, or calling the Islamic Republic Iran. And Iran and Iranians have never been known as terrorists until 1979, when Carter did the same thing that Mr. Biden has done, except everything is getting blamed on him. And I think there's a team of people who gave him the go to do what he did. And there was an interesting clip where the reporter asked Mr. Biden well, Mr. Biden, did you see what about the people who fell off the airplane at 2,000 feet above the ground? And he got pretty upset, and he said, that was 3 to 5 days ago. And I think as a psychiatrist, my first question is that what does that mean? That means that I didn't commit a crime today or yesterday or the day before yesterday. So there are quite meaningful things and issues and statements that we have to listen carefully and not to get consumed by distractions, although they're quite painful distractions. We went through the same thing when Izadi women were taken as slaves, and we know that we all have seen those planes that are filled with young men who are being transported as refugees to the United States of America, and there are no women, no children, nobody who's vulnerable, no American, as a matter of fact, in those planes, and they are all waving hi by when the picture is taken. And with the open borders, with the transportation of these young men, what are they going to be doing in the United States if they are the head of the household? And with leaving all those women back home behind, it doesn't really make sense. So we really have to really focus and concentrate about our security, human safety, human health, despite the fact that, for example, we hear from Australia, the minister comes out and says, oh, we know it's a war. Well, lady, when you say it's a war, you have declared war on humanity. When these people are inside the house and they have 15 minutes to come out to buy some groceries, you're abusing your power, and these people voted you in, and wait until the tide turns, because once the situation gets straightened out, and it is pretty getting straightened out, then you will have a lot to answer, like those people who answered in the Nuremberg trial. Because as a matter of fact, when there is a treatment for a disease, there is no reason for it to be emergency situation. And under emergency circumstances, a lot of governments have been able to declare emergency powers, and they have overreached, and they have done a lot of tricks. As a matter of fact, we were notified that a lot of schools who were not supposed to be doing any injection forcefully, or it should be up to the person and their physician what they want to do, depending on their medical conditions. Everybody's medical condition is different. There was a study that, for example, showed if you have a breakthrough, which these injections appear not to be as effective as it was claimed, and as it was a game, as a matter of fact, to sell more and more of it. One of them was saying, well, we are effective at 92%, and the second one came in, well, it's 93.5%. The other one came in and said 95%. Well, where is the peer review study? And the high priest, Dr. Fauci, comes out and says, just do what I say. What's your problem? That's exactly what he said on national television. What is your problem? Why aren't you listening? Well, this is a science-based or medical-based, evidence-based practice. And if you don't know how to practice evidence-based medicine, then you should not be holding a position to decide for millions of people. People are educated. People, even if they're not educated, I can tell you a cab driver probably knows a lot more about immunology at this point than one of us, because they communicate with a lot of people, and a lot of human growth has happened through direct communication. People have turned away from the social media, because people have figured that the social media, the reason they are for free is because they are trying to mimic persons, humanity, and build up artificial intelligence. I received an article on a front page of Health Leader magazine saying how physicians are happy that AI, artificial intelligence, is going to replace the doctor intervention or doctor-patient relationship, and physicians are happy. Well, where is your poll? Nobody voted, nobody sees the study, and somebody writes an article and you publish it. And this is becoming a cult. This is becoming, I don't even want to call it a religion, because, you know, it's like blindly believing something that somebody tells you. And people are asking questions, and I can tell you, the more you ask questions, the less you're going to get answers, because it is a cult. For example, there is no reason for a woman in Afghanistan, just because they're located in Afghanistan, wearing a burqa. And I think woman number one got executed, unfortunately, by not wearing a burqa. Where are those people who were yelling out for Mr. George Floyd? We don't see them. Where are you? Come out of your holes and stand up for humanity. You don't need CNN, you don't need CNBC, you don't need mainstream media to get validation. You're validated by your own humanity, by your own statement. Trust your own judgment. This is a pivotal moment in human history, and you can make your own mark, especially those people who are celebrities, who have a standing in society. People listen to them, and to really allow this criminality to go on, and then have the gall to even ask, well, how could those people during the Nazi time do this? Well, we're seeing it on steroids right now, and we see all these collaboration. I mean, there are 190 countries that have been basically collaborating around this scientific cult. And I again name it a cult because nobody is allowed to ask questions, and if they ask questions, they get called to the licensing board, or to they get bad reviews on their Google, but nobody's looking at them anymore. I mean, the point is, all of those things that could you were doing slowly, and I mean, when I say you, those people, those few percent, I mean, it's less than 1% of a population who go against humanity, and I think they're looking for immortality, they're looking to be God, and they have God complex. And there is a very nice paper, actually, that was written around the turn of the century, in the 1800s, late 1800s, about God complex and the characteristics of a God, having a God complex, and they all fulfill it. And most of them live in lonesome places. Most of them live in either high mountainous places or in islands, as a matter of fact, so nobody has access to them, because they feel special and they feel their God and their word has to go, and the buck basically stops with what they say, and as much as it doesn't make any sense. And we all know, for example, that there are many reasons for a superpower to be in a place to kind of grab the resources of a country. But the way that things are happening, it seems like it's been following the agreement that happened between the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, where the first one, I remember, it said, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And my question is that, what if we are not happy? Okay. And the third one was United States will not be a superpower anymore. And that's the important one, where basically there are issues with everybody is asking, how is it possible legally to overstep the laws of a country and for a news agency call for the election. Forget all the other question, but for Associated Press, who worked for propaganda to promote Nazi argument during the World War II, to announce and call for who is the president of the United States, that should be questioned. And that's a valid question. How is it once an Associated Press, according to the laws of the land in the United States, the calling is done by the legislative power and by the Electoral College. Then we have the IBM that is related to giving all those punch cards for the Nazis to assign to the Jewish community, unfortunately, to track them, to trace them. And we see the same company, same thing happening with actually a yellow band. Where are those people who were complaining that one of the representatives was actually banned from Twitter, while Taliban is still on Twitter, and they're forced into the population as a legitimate government, like they're gonna change, and they're not terrorists anymore because we tell them they're not terrorists anymore. I mean, it just doesn't make sense, and nobody's gonna accept that. And they're very even people who are we know this is not a party or a partisan issue. This is a situation, this is a humanitarian crisis on every level. And I think the corona was really taking a dive, and this became a huge distraction to really for them to figure out, for this small population to figure out what the heck they're gonna do. If you remember, on that Monday, Mr. Cuomo resigned, not even for causing or suppressing the real treatment that could have killed, that could have really saved thousands of people, according to the top tier physicians and scientists in the United States and across the world. But for sexual harassment, as a matter of fact, he resigned. And then we have this situation developing with Afghanistan, where it was prepared. So the timing and the statements really are an indication of a higher engineering and higher level of attention into the matter, and the psychological response of the people who are really following the truth. I mean, nobody, parents have been showing up in the school boards and saying that, well, if you measure the carbon dioxide under a mask after half an hour, is 6-8 times the carbon dioxide that OSHA even allows for an industrial worker for the 8-hour duration. And doctors have been going to school boards. So there was a really meltdown of all the narrative or narration that the mainstream media was developing. And these people, this a small group of people who think they're God and they want to play God and they have the God complex, they have been moving very slowly, and I'm not sure, nobody's sure why this whole thing started fast pacing. The fast pacing, I have some ideas about it, and where we can discuss them later. But the fast pacing has caused this whole plan to collapse. And the movement that we are really proud of in, I want to say, France, in all the regions across Europe, and all the places where they say no mask, no service, and then people go in and they're not wearing a mask and they receive their service. So human relationship is besides this artificial intelligence that this small group of people want to implement, and want to say that if you keep away 6 feet away from each other and not say hi to your neighbor and act like a little doll that we tell you, that doesn't work with humanity, and it will not happen. And it has not happened. And it took about less than 2 years for this small group to realize it. But the fast pacing of the whole situation, and then coming up with these strange variants where there is no test for them, actually, that was the immediate questions that even the street people passing by were asking in coffee shops from each other, that where did they come up with the test for a variant? And that was just a normal, you don't have to be a PhD or a super scientist to really recognize what the situation is. But we all have lived under tremendous amount of fear. I want to give an example that even very wealthy people, or middle class, upper middle class people, where they have to make a will or they have to make a assignment for their wealth, because they don't want to face the mortality of a human being. It's very, very hard psychologically for us. We know intellectually we all die, but psychologically we don't think about death. And so even those people who have things to leave behind and who want to truly take care of their loved ones, they have a very hard time to go to the lawyer and have that final signature, even if they have initiated it, to really put it on the paper in terms of what their will is, how they want to be taken care of, if something happens to them, or will they want artificial intervention and all that. And so it's really against human nature to think about one's mortality every day. Well, there are people who are like in the spirituality field, and they think about all of that, but that's a small set of population. I want to say the majority of us, we don't think about death and dying. And the past almost 2 years, everybody has been yelling fire, death, you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die, you're gonna die, for the past 2 years. And so people initially got frozen, and they became quite concerned, because they trusted that the people in health status, like Dr. Fauci, for example, or his assistants, or the organizations that work with him, not knowing the dude owns the patent for the injection, and that's what it's pushing. So a lot of people got into this frozen mode and started following the commands. Now, from that population, we have a certain number of people who are able to say, oh my gosh, I got really fearful, and that was not good, and I'm not going to do that again. And that happened to myself, and I was shaken when I went to a place where everybody was wearing their bikinis and their swimsuits. They were hanging out and they were having fun, and as if nothing has happened. and nobody bothered anybody, and so I kind of was shaken and said, like, what's happening? And that was the most beautiful experience that I, for the rest of my life, I will go back to that moment when I really was shaken and woken up. The rest of the population, a lot of times, they double down on the fear, and they kind of don't want to say they made a mistake. And I think allowing humanity, ourselves, to kind of say that, you know, I made a mistake, that's a human thing, and that's quite liberating, and that's what will let the fear go. We have to let the fear go. This fear is completely synthetic, completely manufactured. Of course, everybody wants to feel immortal, and the one thing I know through working with death and dying patients is that nobody thinks at the moment of death and dying, I wish I was 1 minute more at the office. But we think about our beautiful memories with our loved ones, how we traveled, how we laughed, and we want to hold the hand of the person we love or the people we love. We want to be surrounded by the people we love. And the past 2 years, that was taken away from us. And we really need to start thinking about and reflecting on letting go of the fear. And the opposite of fear, I think, is love. And love is so powerful. Smiling at people is so powerful. And this small set of people, the reason actually they want everybody to be masked, it's not that the masks are effective. The one thing Fauci said one time is that masks, one of the arguments is that, you know, why are the surgeons wearing masks in the operating room? Well, the operating room, first of all, is a sterile environment. When we go outside, we don't live in a sterile environment. It's not sterile. And in the operating room, everybody is wearing a mask. And the surgeon specifically is looking at an open wound that is, again, covered with a sterile objects, a sterile a blue, at the time, at least when I went to med school, it was a blue coverings, blue cloth, blue fabric, and we knew that was the sterile. And it's a serious situation in even surgery, where if you've made like a 2-inch cut and then the surgeon realizes that they have to make they had to make a little bit longer, the outcome is not good if they go in and cut more, because that is not in the blueprint. So we don't even touch the wound when it's open during surgery. So the argument about well, the surgeons are wearing a mask is to protect the patient, as a matter of fact, so that as the surgeon is looking down on the wound, you know, none of the sweats or anything, you know, or the breath comes into the wound. And even with that, it does. And that's why a lot of times, for the first 24 hours at least, the patient is kept on triple antibiotics and well hydrated and all that. And, you know, I leave it up to all my colleagues who are experts that. But this whole wearing a mask is really dehumanizing. And then you go through the 10 stages of genocide. You see one of the major issues is dehumanization and covering of the faces. You know, the people who are wearing artillery and the military equipment up to the T, and you know, they're all covered up in black, which is really black is very a morbid color and frightening. And you know, most people are really living in civil society. They're not used to that. And then you have a ordinary individual who's wearing a mask. It dehumanizes both parties, and it was a beautiful, beautiful moment when the police actually in France joined the French uprising, and joined them, literally joined them, and that's the love between humans, and that's something that Mr. Bill Gates could not calculate. I doubt he can even come up with any calculable or any formula, but he pretended, I want to say. I mean, unless there is because he's really a wealthy individual, and a lot of scientists work for him. But he, on October 10, 2010, which is another interesting, I don't know why these people are fascinated with numbers, but on 10-10-10, he has this TED Talk, and he has this formula, and he right out says that, basically, because there shouldn't be any carbon. I don't know what's his problem with carbon. We are made with carbon, and 70% of us, we are all water. And as a matter of fact, he says that even with vaccines and birth control and all the rest of the stuff that he says, we can reduce the population by 10-15%. And I'm not sure who's working or allowing this individual to really make intervention in humanity and on the planet. Because as a matter of fact, if you wanted to look at what's happening with the earth and with climate change, if you want to say climate changes by its nature, is the companies who have been producing plastic. I mean, otherwise we were going all, I mean, remember when I was growing up in Iran, we all had a basket. We go with the basket to the shop, and we pick up stuff, and everything was in a glass bottle, or something that was completely returnable or recyclable. And so for the United Nations to be outright saying that the climate is in red and humans are responsible. I mean, humans have been a consumer of these corporations, and if these corporations are they need to be the one who stop using plastic, and they have accumulated a lot of wealth during the past 2 years, and they should be using that money to clean up the earth. Somebody should be telling China to stop deep sea trawling, instead of right out, like Apple CEO comes out and says that we don't talk about nudity and we don't talk about China. Well, if China is deep sea trawling and wiping the whole ocean flora, it's not the human problem, it's a CCP problem, who have taken the Chinese people slaves. If we see some Chinese people outside China, those people are from the CCP. 1.5 billion people, or more than 1 billion people are basically work under social control of all these passports, or I don't want to say even passports, because this is the opposite. When they talk about the passport, vaccine passport, the passport is actually locking down the individuals. It's not like a pass to go places from one continent to another, or to travel. It's more like a pass from your kitchen to your probably living room, even going from, if you want to make it further, from your own door to the grocery store and run back in 15 minutes, like they are doing in New Zealand and Australia, with only one person who probably was diagnosed with a PCR test, that even the CDC has said PCR is not the valid or diagnostic test. So we need to really come to the table and say all these responsible person, if they want to show their responsibility and not end up in really dark pages of history, they need to come out clean, and they need to say this is all over. The emergency circumstances is done. Once you have treatment, we are done with emergency lockdown, which is another interesting term these people have used, as if we are prisoners or cattle that need to be locked down. I've worked in the forensic system, and that's what they do, lock down to count the population in the area, in the prison. And I think we have really worked very hard to accomplish our freedom. And if we saw those people who were unfortunately in Afghanistan connecting to the grabbing on to the airplane and fell off the airplane, sadly, 2,000 feet they held on to the airplane to come to freedom. We have to know what we have and fight for it and stand up for it, and not be like a bunch of cowards and throw the towel in for a bunch of people who are hiding behind the curtain. And I have to say that even that scene, you have to remember, no airplane has to get a permission to lift off from the ground, and if people are connected or around the plane, I'm not sure who would be giving an order to cause this kind of a fear or this kind of a horrific scene that resembled the individuals who were jumping out of the Twin Tower buildings in 2001 during 9/11. It was a very unfortunate scene to see, but that was quite preventable. The airplane should not have been allowed to fly, as a matter of fact. And the one thing I want to mention is that we need to really hold the United States accountable for the United States citizens, thousands and thousands and thousands of people that they're told that, okay, we know you're in Afghanistan, but you need to make it to the airport. Well, how are they going to make it to the airport if every street is blocked by the Taliban, who take the Americans hostage? And or they're gonna trade them in to be kept hostage with the Islamic Republic. What is happening? And we cannot put our head under the sand because a few people who are not even elected officials are playing behind the curtain to create this catastrophic human crisis for all of us to witness and feel so helpless. And for the Americans, who are quite kind, hospitable people, to feel bad and to feel responsible or to feel like they did this. No, Americans did not do this. These are not Americans who are doing this. They, as a matter of fact, a lot of Iranians, when Americans were in Iran, they have good memories, they have good relationships still. And even the hostage crisis now that happened, you have to go back to see what was the stunt for President Carter to get elected, and it went sour because Khomeini was a very a stubborn person. But I leave that up to the historians. I don't want to speculate. But every page during the past 40 some years seemed to be quite designed and engineered by people like Brzezinski, who wrote the plan and who came up with this cult of science and to be able to control the human planet resources under the name of climate change, or wiping out the carbon print. I mean, we live by our carbon print. It's not something we should be ashamed of. It should be something we should be proud of. And if there is any issue, it's the corporations who are responsible, who have the financial means to clean up, and stop blaming humans for it. With that thought, I really appreciate Television Iran Aryaee, Dr. Saeed Hamzavi, Siavash, and also Mahnaz, who have been tremendous to keep this television for freedom fighters running and going. And we wish the best for all of our brothers and sisters, freedom fighters across the world. Hope is the cure for fear. Be strong. پاینده ایران.